So I'm recording now and I'm asking for Mikko to start the short introduction.
All right, thanks. Yes. And you're hearing me fine and seeing me fine? Good. Yeah, I'm really honored to give this first introductory speech on this Nordic forum. I'm convinced that this will go down in history. I also feel obliged to represent my country, Finland, here. So I will try to use my 15 minutes wisely and concisely. So I hope that you still have some energy left even at this late hour. I'm going to squeeze in many points that I personally find interesting and important to my 15 minutes. First of all, one of the main goals of this forum is to share experiences and case examples of actual journalistic work across country borders. We want to show that what has been done in order to encourage each other that things can be done and to lay basis for the joint discussion about what should be done. So I will begin by introducing our Conciliatory Journalism project. And although it's hopeless to squeeze our 4 years of work into a few minutes, I hope that I can give you an overview of our approach and what we did in practice. And hopefully this works as an invitation for further questions and discussion. But then the second main goal of this forum is to put all these different projects and cases in different countries into context and to look at them together and in relation to each other and also to other things going on in our societies and in the journalistic field. So therefore, I will also try to expand my scope a bit from our project and conciliatory journalism and to talk about what I have learned during the project about what other institutions are doing. Journalists aren't the only ones worried about polarization or juxtaposition of elites versus people or aggregation of socially conflictual issues and so on. So this is what I mean by the dialogic term in the title. And the title is, of course, a little bit of a joke. Social scientists always seem to label interesting social phenomena in a grandiose manner as terms. So there we go. But of course, I also do think that something noteworthy is going on, at least in the Finnish society, as a counter move and reaction to the concerns about increasing social unrest and instability of the public life. And I really look forward to hearing from you all if you see similar movements taking place from your point of view, or if you think that I'm stretching there. So on with the actual burger then. Our approach to the theme of social responsibility of journalism stems from the research project that we carried out in the Tampere University in Finland during 2016 to 2018. We used action research methodology to discuss the challenges that journalists face when reporting on controversial topics. We organized a series of workshops in different parts of Finland with an open call to anyone working in the journalistic field to come and discuss their experiences and concerns with polarizing public discourse. Our initiative got a very welcoming response among journalists, and in the end, altogether 49 journalists participated in our workshops. Laura Ahva and myself were the principal researchers in the project, but especially in the fieldwork stage, we had also other colleagues working in the project, including 2 journalists who worked as advisors in planning the workshops and also participated as commentators. So this was definitely a joint effort of research and practice that started from questions and concerns and developed towards a suggestion for journalists who found themselves troubled amongst social conflicts and polarization and increased aggression of the public discourse. So it wasn't conciliatory journalism isn't like a new form of journalism developed by us researchers and then educated forward, but rather a question that got some answers during the workshops. The social context for the workshops in the early 2016 was that Finland was experiencing similar political tensions as most European countries, with rising populist politics, increasing hate speech towards journalists, and misinformation sites stirring up the public sphere. One could perhaps best summarize the sentiments in our workshops as confused, concerned, and critical of the overall performance of journalism. The general sensation was that the journalists were not well prepared to deal with the changing environment, changing media sphere. And they felt that many times the journalistic media was circulating and amplifying polarized discourses, making matters worse rather than supporting constructive and diverse public debate. So we researchers brought to the workshop discussions theories and practices of mediation and dialogue, and these different forms of socially responsible journalism, such as public journalism, peace journalism, constructive journalism, solutions journalism, and so on. And for third point, the theories from media studies about online communities and moderation, how to build constructive communities and fandoms online. Then based on these workshop discussions, the journalists would plan and carry out different kinds of experiments on how to do things differently, how to challenge the problems that they felt in their everyday work. These experiments would take different forms depending on what type of journalists were in question, what media they represented, what positions they held in the newsrooms, and so on. And the experiments, if there were journalistic stories, would then be published on their own, in their own media, be it radio or newspapers, magazines, whatever. Or some of the experiments were more like newsroom guidelines that were then applied in the work of those newsrooms. Then these experiments were again reflected on in the following workshop meetings. And these workshop debates and also complementary interviews and the actual experiments, the texts themselves, form the empirical material for our research. In addition to academic publishing, we also compiled a handbook of conciliatory journalism, which is primarily aimed at journalists, but also anyone working with communication. And happily enough, we have heard that it can be useful and educating to almost anyone. So maybe it has some value also as a media education device. And we academics are, of course, really thrilled to see this idea resonate among journalists and take on a life on its own, even to the extent that some of the journalists who participated in the workshops founded the Association for Conciliatory Journalists, SOPIVA. Especially Noora Kettunen, who is here also today, is to be thanked here, and also Matlena Ylikoski is a very active part of this association, so shout out to you guys. Now, SOPIVA carries the torch of conciliatory journalism in Finland, and also Laura and myself have become involved with the association, so the fruitful dialogue between theory and practice carries on. Where, of course, this evening and this Nordic Forum being one great example of this as well. So now to the core of what is conciliatory journalism. Based on all this empirical work, all these discussions in the workshops, we have formulated these three basic principles for conciliatory journalism. And these principles form the backbone for us when we answer to the question, what is conciliatory journalism? And they are presented in the handbook as well as in our academic articles. But the one thing that maybe hasn't so far been so much stressed in our talk, and I'm going to kind of bring it up as a new angle today, is the relation of these principles to the theories and practices of restorative dialogue, because there is a connection and they resonate with other dialogic methods as well. So that's why I've kind of added these the smaller titles to our principles here. So first of our principles is clarify the conflict, which for journalists means, of course, to uncovering what exactly is the root of the controversy, what makes these particular issues difficult for public discussion. And here I see a connection with restorative justice's idea of conflict as property, which means that people should have an ownership to their conflicts. They have a right to be involved and in dealing with their own conflicts, and social institutions such as legal procedures should not take the conflict away from them. And journalism can support this right by not defining the conflicts from above, from the elite point of view, but rather by listening to those actually involved and by making sure that they are understood correctly. So hence the second principle, which is work towards dialogue. So here we stress the idea of not simply giving voice or opening a channel. In Finnish, we call this kuunteluttaminen, which is more than just listening. It's listening, helping people listen. So the idea here is that the connection to restorative ideas is the right to be understood and in a respectful manner, kind of in a way that people feel that they're being treated in a just way. And then as a result, we arrived at the third principle, which is, I think, in the practice level of journalism, maybe a bit more abstract or relates more to groups and institutions rather than individuals and single stories. The idea of supporting trust. In our project, this was especially related to the aftermath of journalism. For instance, the journalist's interaction with the audiences in the online communities. Or journalists' ability to maintain open and trusted relationships with their sources. And I guess our argument here is that journalism can and should support people's trust, not only in journalism itself, but also in our society's ability to handle conflict and build a safe environment for its citizens. And also support people's trust in each other and their ability to coexist and cooperate in the society despite their differences. So this comes close to the idea of restoration, where through participation and dialogue, people can be supported to right the wrongs and restore the sense of things being as they should be. For instance, in mediation, this doesn't mean winning the case. It means a deeper experience of justice and being treated with respect for all parties involved. So this was kind of a quick run through of our project and conciliatory journalism in a nutshell. So how many minutes do I have left? Paula, are you keeping time? 2 minutes. Fine, let me use those final minutes to describe the dialogic turn that is in today's title. And this is a heavy looking slide, but I just this opens up a few points that I have come across during my years in this research project and also all the spin-off projects during and after this project. I have become involved in the Finnish scene of mediation and conflict management from different angles. I have participated in numerous seminars and committees and research plans and all kinds of policy initiatives, also outside journalism. And actually, I have even started as a volunteer in crime and civil case mediation. So from these different points of view, through these connections, I have seen that the societal use for dialogue is increasing significantly in the Finnish society. And money and resources are also there to some extent. In these past 5 years, there have been several programs or policies to fund initiatives for developing dialogic methods and researching polarization. So I have mapped here some areas in the society where dialogic methods are becoming more and more prevalent. First of all, conflict resolution, of course, is what probably comes to mind first when you mention conciliation and mediation. There are several elements in Finnish society where it's been used. The criminal and civil cases, mediation is one, but also community dialogues such as neighborhood mediation, work community, school mediation, where dialogue is increasingly being used and developed in dealing with conflict situations. But in addition to that, dialogue is also becoming more and more important in citizen participation. For instance, these policies to maintain good relations between population groups are one important part of the current government's policies. And there are all these kind of different projects to support local communities. For instance, Mikko Hautakangas, who is here today as well, has been doing this work with the Helsinki Diakonissalaitos, I don't know the English term. And then also dialogue as collaborative governance. This means collaboration between different kinds of organizations, from the ministry level to NGOs, municipalities, whatever. So this is a cooperation between different bodies of power where dialogue is increasingly sought to avoid conflicts and kind of make political decision making socially justifiable and lasting. And then I've also added a couple of more things. Dialogue as a textual genre or event format. For instance, Erätauko-säätiö, Erätauko project is making dialogue well known in Finland as a method for almost anything, like for information gathering and for making journalism also. They provide education for this story circle method and want people to really use the dialogue method in all kinds of local aspects or whatever. So you can just kind of call Erätauko and ask for their help if you want to organize dialogues. And of course, in journalism, also dialogue as format is now present in different kinds of projects. For instance, the Europe Talks or several TV formats that we've seen in Finland. So as a result of all this dialogic turn that I'm kind of suggesting here, we are also seeing dialogue becoming more and more professional in Finland. And there are a lot of suggestions that there should be education for dialogue professionals and make it more a kind of a established profession. And we'll see what happens with that. If this kind of development goes on, we will probably have more centered education for dialogue professionals instead of the current situation where people come from all walks of life and find their own expertise in dialogue from different sources. And maybe now my question to this forum, or what I want to end with, is kind of my experience that people from all these different organizations and places where they work against, these people who work against polarization and in support of participatory democracy, warmly welcome conciliatory journalists, and they feel that the idea of bringing the media and journalists into these tables has been seen as valuable and maybe even surprisingly innovative and new idea. So my question is that how do journalists respond then? Are the journalists the most skeptical and cynical about this kind of collaboration, worried about their objectivity and independence ideals more than enthusiastic about the possibilities? So my question is that if journalism is on the side of the people, the citizens, and should support their basic rights and their opportunities to participate in the democracy, shouldn't journalism then also support the dialogic processes that are open to citizens? And that's my...
Okay, that's all from Mikko. So I'll start.